Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another wonderful Monday Night Magic with your favorite epigenetic geeks, my amazing friend Ken Close, and myself, Lori Falk. And we are thrilled to be here with you this evening as we talk about and unpack the topic of your beautiful, authentic self and the gift that it is to the world.
I love that topic. It's, I mean, there's so much to unpack around this because authenticity as an emotion, think about it for a second, because there's a state of being, but there's also a state of feeling. But as an emotion, it has a certain frequency to it. And we're going to kind of talk about some of these frequencies. And some of you guys are already familiar. I imagine all of you are familiar with energy and frequency, especially when it comes around to how you feel in these bodies, right? We don't have to know anything about science or technology to know what we feel, right? And oftentimes when we are in some way, I don't know, lower in feeling, in other words, lack of energy, maybe we didn't sleep well, and Lori's got a little bit about that, right? But we maybe didn't rest well, or we didn't get the normal amount of nutrients or whatever it is that we normally use to fuel ourselves or to energize ourselves. And when that lowers, it's very easy to get on board with a lower vibration frequency of emotion because the body is already compromised. And so again, there's a question of what comes first, the chicken or the egg, the emotion or the body feeling. And the interesting part about that is the first thing came was the thought. How many of you guys have ever had a feeling you're going, I don't even know where that came from, right? You have no idea. Why am I feeling this, right? Well, I guarantee you in neuroscience, it is a very clear study around how a thought generates the feelings. And the synaptic connections in our brain, some of them are so efficient, so well oiled, right? So bunched up in a bundle that we don't even know we're thinking it. You ever had that happen? All of a sudden you just get, all of a sudden you're a moment or two goes by and you just realize I've been thinking about the same thing or rehearsing the same phrase or going over the same conversation in my brain for the last half hour, right? It's like over and over and over. How many of you done that? I've done that. I'm like, I say the same words, right? I'm doing something. And it's funny, my mind is going, yep, okay, you pick up that thing and you put it over here and you cut right there and you measure that. I mean, I'm physically doing something, right? My body is in operation. And yet my mind is redundantly saying the same stuff I'm doing. What is that? So it's funny because these minds are amazing. We look at them as being an obstacle sometimes, and they certainly can be. But it's normal to have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. This is normal. What's not normal is how much time you spend on the unserving ones. I mean, I guess that's not true. It is kind of normal. People are doing it regularly, but it's not healthy. I'll put it that way. We stay stuck in the redundancy of these unhealthy thoughts, such as some kind of a phrase. Maybe we just had a conversation with a friend and a friend said something that was just like kind of a dagger, right? And we have that same conversation with that friend all day in our minds, and then all week, sometimes all month. And that same rehearsal gets built in as a redundant circuit. And the more we have a thought, the same thought over and over again, the stronger the neural bundling around that thought just becomes very easy to happen, and happens without us being aware so much. The interesting part about those thoughts is they still create chemistry in the body, aka emotion. And a thought generates a signaling, a peptide down into the body, so that it energizes specific centers in our body so that we can have these feelings. Anybody ever had butterflies in your tummy, right? Those are fun, aren't they? Sometimes they're because of just some sensory perception. Maybe you saw some awesome looking scenery, right? Who was he? No, I'm kidding. Who was she, right? For you guys out there, you see some awesome scenery, woo, butterflies in the tummy, whatever. There's still a thought, but it's so sometimes subtle or behind the conscious you that you don't realize it's happening. So you can get these feelings that can go on and on and on in the body. And if they are of these lower vibrations, then they're going to be unserving. I think, Laura, you've shared a document or a picture once of frequencies of emotion.
Yes.
There's you guys can look them up. There are emotions that are of the higher level. I call them above the belt, right? Because the root center, the survival centers are down there. And those ones that are below the belt, those tend to be that lower frequency, lower vibration, and also very, very huge energy consumers. Okay, so hatred, for instance. There it is. So you see this map. It's an awesome map because it also shows consciousness, the scale of consciousness over here. Like the consciousness of a rock is about a 10 maybe. And then look at where those lower frequencies are, those lower scales of consciousness. So around the center of the document there, you see the scale. That's the scale of consciousness. How we can go unconscious when we get to those below the belt kind of emotions, and seemingly that this is where you don't necessarily know they're going on, right? They are, but they're so unconscious from your awareness that they just happen behind the scenes, and yet still requiring a thought, some kind of analysis that propagated the signal into creating these emotions. So anybody have a favorite up there? What's yours, Lori?
Joy.
That's great.
I would say love, because love is, of course, all there is. But joy is an even higher frequency than love. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So put in the chat, what's your favorite, folks? What's your favorite emotion? And then maybe what is, and you don't have to, but I mean, we're talking about authenticity here tonight. So what is your most challenging one, and maybe below the belt? So, and if it's not on here, you can go ahead and put it in there. But I want to talk about this and these high frequencies, and love being of that highest nature. We're going to talk about one that's even higher than that. And surprisingly, guess what that is? Authenticity, right? Why? How can that be higher than the frequency of love? Because let me put it this way. Remember what I said, that a thought generates a feeling in these bodies. Even an unconscious thought still generates, the body's a servant. It still generates a feeling. So the body is this servant to serve us. What is us? It's this consciousness. It's not necessarily the thinking us, right? Because those 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, there is what I like to call the observer of that, right? So let's say you're having a thought right now. Who or what is observing that? Because there's another level, another plane of understanding. And when it comes to authenticity, in order to feel love, there's got to be a higher level of awareness. Because how many of you guys just made up love today? Anybody just got the feeling of love? It's brand new this moment, right now in this period of time? No, it came from somewhere, right? And I guarantee you it came from somewhere when you were very, very young, way back when, a ways back. There was some assessment that your senses, the senses of you, what you tasted or felt or saw or smelled, it felt some way in your body, and maybe the outside source that was giving it to you defined it for you. Like, this is love. And you said, oh, wow, this is love. And your mind wrote that in stone, right? Etched it with a chisel in stone. This is what love is, right? And so from then on, you believed it. Now, what if that moment in time was when you were someone was being slapped or beaten or hidden in a closet? This is love, right? That gets etched in stone into the biology of the body. And the mind, anytime there's an outside trigger or some resource that says a familiarity around when you first experienced it, then the feeling happens in the body. It doesn't feel like there's a thought associated with it, but there is. And so that's your authentic self. That's the authentic you, right? Now, it doesn't mean it's healthy, because some forms of love were abusive, right? And we may know somebody out there. Some forms of love were very traumatic, and yet still authentic to that human being, to that entity, to that body. So this gets written into what, as an engineer in the electronics and the technical world in computers and programming, call it the BIOS, right? The basic operating system. Your computer right now is running on a set of instructions that even if you unplug the computer and plug it back in, it won't go away, right? It's etched in stone. It's called the BIOS. And it's basically an input-output system that it doesn't require voltage to keep it alive. It doesn't require any good software to keep it going. In fact, your Microsoft or your Apple, your software, whatever it is, could go corrupt, but the BIOS would still stay intact, right? And that's what we all have. We all have this basic operating system. And that's what gets etched in stone. Somewhere along the line, there's been a definition assigned to all of your emotions. And you saw that chart that Lori put up there, both good and bad. And the observer of all that, that's that authentic you. It's above all that. It's kind of interesting because let me just kind of give you a little rundown about what the definition of authenticity is. So it's basically, it's you being your true and your own personality, right? It's essentially your values and your spirit, regardless of any pressure or anything you're under to act otherwise. So that's the authentic you. Again, that operating system that's etched in stone. So no matter what the other pressures are, no matter what the other influences are, there's still this sense of personality, values, spirit, no matter what. And like I mentioned earlier, the one who assessed love as some kind of traumatic experience, right? That's still built into their personality, into those values, into the spirit of that being. So it's kind of interesting, and I love this one. Do you want to share this one with us, Lori?
Yeah, we were talking earlier about Brene Brown, and she has such amazing wisdom, and the way she presents things is so spot on and accurate and poignant. And she says authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we are supposed to be and embracing who we are.
Right?
Kind of that simple.
I love it. I love it. And it is so valuable because those definitions, even from the very basic operating system, they get etched in there. And what if they're not great? Right? What if they're not great? What if we needed to make some adjustments and changes? We were talking earlier today about these things that are so ingrained, and we can read a book. And one of the books, again, we just talk about Brene Brown. Books that I recommend from her is The Power of Vulnerability. It's an amazing book. That particular book is a teaching on authenticity, connection, and courage. So Brene Brown is a researcher, right? She hangs out in a lab like this. Well, kind of at her house, but she's a researcher and looking at people, right? She's got lots of subjects and takes data and crunches data based on, some kind of information she wants to extract. And based on the demographic that she's studying, comes up with certain findings around these contents. And authenticity is one of the ones that she talks about in that book, The Power of Vulnerability. And that's our subject tonight. So highly recommend that book. It comes on Audible as well. I'm a big Audible fan. I'm moving around a lot, so sometimes I can always take things in by listening at the same time as I'm doing other things. So it's very, very useful. But she also talks about, since we're on the topic of Brené Brown, I love one of her other quotes. She did a interview with Lewis Howes. Some of you guys may know who Lewis is, and he's got some great guests. And they were doing this interview, and they were talking about authenticity and kind of fitting in and such. And Brené says, she said, the opposite of belonging is fitting in. And this is what she discovered from some of her researching hundreds of people, that the opposite of belonging is fitting in. Think about that for a second. Because belonging, right? If you belong somewhere, you're probably fitting within the matrix of some other group or some other environment. But if you go there and fit in, now you're not you, are you? Right? If you just fit in, you just force my way in there, I'm just going to fit in. But she says, because fitting in is assessing a group of people and thinking, so again, you're in a group of people and you're thinking, who do I need to be? What do I need to say? What do I need to wear? And how do I need to act to change who I am? Right? Well, that is not authenticity. And true belonging never asks us to change who we are. It demands that we be who we are. Right? That's real belonging, that we be who we are. So I can share that the link. That was it was a great little video that Brené and Lewis did regarding that content, and it's so useful because how often anybody here ever just tried to fit in somewhere? Maybe, I don't know, different groups. You go, I got to dress a certain way, and if I don't feel quite comfortable. I mean, I'm in my lab. I should probably have a white lab coat or something, right? Don't you think? Maybe a mad scientist hat or something. I don't know. But not. So share this with us. Guideposts for wholehearted living. I love this.
And this is from Brené's book, The Gifts of Imperfection. Okay. So you were talking about fitting in. And why do we think we need to fit in? Because we're worried about what people think, right? So we want to let go of what people think and cultivate authenticity. Mm-hmm. Because we're being our vulnerable, authentic self, we are not worried about what other people think. We're just showing our magnificence of who we are as human beings. We were talking earlier about when you're on stage and you're giving a presentation and you're looking at the audience, and 80% of the people out there are just fixated. They're in awe. They're so loving everything you're saying. They're hanging on to every word. And there's always that 20% that they're not in it. They're not feeling it. They're just not. And what oftentimes, especially people who aren't educated, or no, I shouldn't say educated, people who aren't schooled at public speaking will, because of their insecurity, focus on the 20%. And I was sharing with Ken, what helped me to get over that was my very first, as a coach, my very first presentations were around angel communication. And generally speaking, I was giving this presentation to an audience who really, really, really wanted to hear it. But every once in a while, I'd get invited to speak at like a funeral home or a church or, general public. type place, you had to know going into that there were going to be people who were going to be questioning everything I said, who were going to be a strong 20% no. In fact, they were probably a hell no. Of course, they wouldn't have said that because they're of the more pure religious ilk. Or anyway, I'm not going down that rabbit hole. I'm trying really hard to be kind. So I had to not care, and I really didn't. And every time I would get confronted, because people would invariably ask questions, I would just say, 80% of the religions in the world believe in angels, and that's all I'm talking about. And then I just change the subject, because that's all it was. So really knowing who you are at a core level, and not worrying about what people think, and not worrying about perfectionism. Those are two big things. How can you worry? I mean, if you're worried about being perfect, you're not going to be in your authenticity either. And one of the reasons people absolutely love Brene Brown is that she is always authentic. She's always telling it just like it is. And in that vein, I believe that when we share our authentic self, when we tell our truth, when we tell our stories, sometimes there's somebody out there that needed to hear your vulnerability, that needed to hear what you were going through. So I probably look right now like I've got it all together. I know how to put on makeup and do hair and dress and what colors to wear on Zoom and what to look at as far as looking into the little green dot where the camera is. I got that all done. And I just got back from Cabo. In fact, I got back from Cabo at about 2 a.m. So yes, as Ken mentioned earlier, I didn't get much sleep. And yes, I was traveling for like 12 hours yesterday, due to all kinds of crazy delays and things like that. Now, you would think that I was in Cabo. Oh my God, I must have just had the best time. I should have had so much fun. Well, I tell you, the place is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I was thrilled to be there. I had actually won a trip, and it was great to be there, great to be part of it, great to be in that amazing, like 95-degree weather with 95% humidity. You think my hair is curly today? You should have seen it down there. That was my authentic self. But the other part, and this is how this came up today. I told Ken I was tired. And I'm sitting there thinking, we're talking about authenticity. And I'm not telling him the truth. Well, I was tired, so you could say that was the truth, but that wasn't my authentic self. My authentic self was miserable. Just got back from a week in Cabo, and I was feeling miserable. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I am a workaholic. I have been for decades. I thought I had it under control, and then COVID hit, and it raised its ugly head again. And the worst thing in the world for a hardcore workaholic is to go on vacation. Because you have to face everything in your life that is uncomfortable, that you have been trying to avoid by working and working and working. I'm so much of a workaholic. And Izzy, I'm just gonna say up front, I love you and I love talking to you. But really and truly, I knew when you called me on Friday, it was business related. Should I have actually really been on the phone for a half hour talking about business when I'm in Cabo on vacation, supposed to be having a really, really good time, fun in the sun? So I'm not in the best of shape today. I'm not at the top of my game. I'm doing the best I can. I'm showing up for you guys. But my truth is, I'm sad. I'm really, really sad. And I'm going to take a hard look at my life and make some improvements so that the next time I go on vacation, I can really enjoy myself and have a good time.
this is why we're being authentic right now. You know, I mean, this is where it comes to a head, you might say. This head is where it all starts to fester, and we make up things. We make up things like, I have to be a certain self all the time. And I love what you said, Lori. The working self, you know, could get so caught up in that as a crutch that, you know, it's not until we actually breathe for a moment, stop, stand back and breathe, that all that stuff crashes down, right? And the body, here's the thing I want you guys to understand from an epigenetic perspective. I'm always going to bring it back to the level playing field, because everyone has a body. And until we give it the proper value and decide how we want to treat it, it's going to do things based on laws, very specific laws of physics. And the laws of physics dictate that things that are coherent amplify. Okay, so we talked about, you know, before we got on the call, you know, what would be a good program maybe to run with our Healys. Coherence is a great one, but also so is memory. There is a program on the learning page. It's called Memory. And what it does is it activates certain parts of the brain or energizes certain parts of the brain so that we can remember. Now, the key thing about memory is not just so we can remember the past, but so we can remember the present. Right now, what you guys are learning or hearing, being able to remember the present moment. Every time we learn something, we build over 2,500 synaptic connections around the content, right? Brain matter comes together. It's a great phenomenon. You're actually creating the hardware to run the software in your brain in real time. This is a cool thing, right? But if we don't rehearse that, within 24 hours, half of those synaptic connections get pruned away. Okay. So we can read a book on something and gain quite a lot of information, but if we don't rehearse it, right, commit it to memory over and over again, we don't retain it. So right now, that's why I wanted to mention that particular frequency, and everything has a certain frequency to it. These bodies consume energy all day, every day. They consume energy at a much more rapid rate when we're running those below the belt emotions I spoke of earlier. Okay, because those emotions are consumers. All emotions essentially have some kind of energetic influence, but some are contributors and some are consumers. Have you ever felt anger and a frustration, right? And it's just been happening for a long period of time, and at the end of it, you're just beat, you're just tired. Or sometimes, you know, you just want to cry it out. What happens at the end of a big cry? It's nap time. It's like, you're just like, oh, I can now, I've let that go. I can take a nap, right? These are consumers. But how about joy? Have you ever been in such a huge blissful moment where it's like, you're just like on caffeine or something. You're just on this rush of energy. And it's so enlightening that that the body, it somehow comes up with extra energy. And I'm going to share a quick little story about a young man, friend of my children's, who, you know, he started dating this gal. He was like super excited, and they did a lot of stuff together. They got along great, right? Went to the movies and dinner and stuff at the park, and that months after month they went on. They were doing great, and one day she changed her mind, gave him a call, and said, "Hey, this is not working for me. It's over. I don't love you." And this young man just fell apart, right? He thought it was the real deal. And how often do we get so engaged in an emotion that we can't see anything else, right? Love is one of those things. It's blind, but it's so good feeling. We want it to continue. And so when that happened, he went into a stupor. He spiraled downward, stopped going to work, quit going out, didn't sleep, didn't eat, week after week. This went on for 3 weeks. This young man was in a heap of despair, and his friends came over and looked at him. And he looked terrible. You ever know anybody like that? You ever see anybody like that? So depressed, so sad. All they want to do is sleep. They have no energy, none. The body's being depleted. Everything they eat, if they eat, is not useful to the body because we're in stress response. So everything was falling apart in this young man's life. 3 weeks down the road, this young lady calls him up and says, "Hey, I made a mistake. I do love you. I've been miserable and I miss you. Can I see you tonight?" Now, this kid has been, his house was a wreck, right? He looked like junk. And she wanted to see him in a couple of hours. So what do you think happened? This boy turned himself around and within 2 hours was dressed, showered, out the door, and meeting this young lady full of joy, full of love, full of excitement and enthusiasm. Where'd that come from? He hadn't been eating. He hadn't been sleeping, right? He'd been in depression mode. His body's been a consumer. Where did this newly found energy source come from? Well, enthusiasm, passion, love, joy, bliss, those carry an amplification that are beyond the physical sense of your body and your space and time. So in other words, when have you ever experienced that, right? You could be in such a low vibrational state, so tired. And then all of a sudden somebody says, you get a call from somebody or something happens that just raises your vibration and you go, woo, and all of a sudden you don't remember being tired. What happened? We take our view when we connect to the divine intelligence, love, joy, bliss, authenticity are all a higher vibration above a certain level, above the heart and above. And that vibrational state has its own energy source. It is a divine intelligence. And when we get on board with it, when we can feel it within our own bodies, it amplifies these bodies. So there is a phenomenon, and this is a law of physics called constructive interference. Write this down because I want you to understand this, because constructive interference is a super powerful tool. Constructive interference says that when like phenomenons, aka energy and frequencies, come together, they amplify. They amplify. Now, I want you to know, and some of you guys understand in the quantum field, there is an infinite field of intelligence. This infinite field of intelligence also operates within these bodies as the bodies naturally do their process, such as cell division. Okay. In other words, our bodies are turning over 800,000 cells per second. Well, you're not doing any of that. There's a divine intelligence that's doing that for you. Okay. And part of the genetic code, the mother lode of that genetic code that's written into that new cell structure is from the energy within your body, the frequency of energy. And so when your frequency of energy is love, joy, bliss, authenticity, the divine intelligence amplifies that signal and you genetically become a higher version of yourself. Think about that. A more amplified, a more energetic, a more elated, a more blissful, a more energetic self. Just like that young man I was telling you about. Where did that energy come from? It wasn't in his house because it smelled like garbage, and it wasn't in his body because it smelled like garbage. He hadn't been showering, he hadn't been sleeping. It wasn't in the words that were spoken to him. It was in the feeling that he had created inside of him. And that feeling, the thought that generated the feeling, amplified his entire biology. Okay. And you can relate to this. If it's ever happened to you where you're just dead tired and all of a sudden you had some kind of good news and you found energy that you didn't know existed, it wasn't yours. It wasn't yours until that moment. Then it became yours because you got on board with a coherent signal. And when we can show up in our lives as an authentic version of ourselves, what happens is is we are amplified by any other signal that is true to us. Now, remember I said earlier about the authentic version that might be etched in stone that wasn't great? We can change that BIOS system, but it requires some diligent work. It requires us to do some practice that involves things that we haven't done yet, right? Because if we had been doing them, we'd probably be healed, right? It involves things we don't know yet, and that's okay. Because again, like I said, it's good to know what you know, but it's also good to know what you don't know, so that we can add some content and some exercises to rewrite some of those ancient, because some of that stuff, as Lori has said in our past, some of our things are from our genes, from our ancestral content. And Healy has got some great tools that we can use, such as the coaching program, right, Lori?
Oh my goodness. You know, we were talking earlier about how you can say affirmations over and over and over again. And like, I'm at an ideal weight. That's an easy one. Great example. You're looking in the mirror, you're 50 pounds overweight, and you're saying, I am thin and sexy. There isn't one part of you that's going to buy into that and believe it. And in this situation where we're talking about authenticity, if I were to ask you to say, as I reveal my authentic self, I am loved and admired by all. As I reveal my authentic self, I am loved and admired by all. Now, I'm sure there's some people on this call that would be comfortable with this, and I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call that would not be. I get more resistance when I ask my clients to say a statement like that, especially in the beginning when they're just starting to do their personal growth work. And those of you who have taken my coaching programs, you know, and you've been on here, I'm always talking about getting out of your head and into your heart. So what I'm about to read you is another form of that intention. But really listen to this and see if you couldn't buy into this. I fully and completely love, admire, appreciate, and accept myself as a divine being of God. Mm-hmm. I am a being of pure love and light who adds beauty and value to the world around me. I treat myself like the god or goddess that I am, lovingly caring for myself, respecting myself, and treating myself to things that bring me bliss. As I reveal my authentic, magnificent self to the world, I am loved and admired by all.
Wow. I love that.
So it feels different, right? It feels different. And when it feels different, you can then start to imagine what it would be like to be in the energy of that true authenticity and how people really might start loving exactly who you are. I bet there's not one of you on this call tonight that loves me any less for revealing my inadequacy, my vulnerability, my addiction. And I know that in my heart. And I thank you for that. And I encourage all of you, use the coaching module, put this intention in there, and really start loving yourself at a deeper, more profound level than you ever have before. Because one thing I know for sure is every single person on this planet has a limited amount of self-love, including Oprah Winfrey. Mm-hmm. So Really and truly. That coaching module, I know you're probably sick of hearing me say it, but it's off the charts amazing. It is so accurate. It is so profound. The fact that you could take that intention and put it in there. And yes, I know it's more than 200 characters. Whoop-de-doo. The Healy's not reading what you're writing anyway. You say that intention out loud and you say it from your heart. And then you run that analysis and you are going to find deep, profound, accurate information that's going to tell you what's in the way of you not being able to experience that. And not only is it going to give you the knowledge of what's in the way and where it came from, but good Lord, you then get to go and run those frequencies every day and help shake all that stuff out of your subconscious. The amount of time that it takes to do this level of healing, it could take you 6 months to do what the Healy is going to be able to do in 6 weeks.
I love that, because it's, and there are some amazing microcurrent programs too that you can implement in conjunction, because there's a huge influence. And as I was saying, I'm in the lab, right? The performance side of these bodies. When I say performance, I'm not talking about Olympic athletes. I'm just talking about whatever level up from where you are, right? That's it. Because we're talking about being authentic. And as Lori mentioned, if you're standing in front of the mirror and you're rehearsing some statement that that your senses are not taking in as truth. In other words, you're looking in the mirror and you're going, you're not really seeing what you're saying. And that's the mind and the sensory, or conscious and subconscious, get on board with dissonance, with a disorder, because the body is precognitive, folks. In other words, what I say by precognitive, it means that it can read your mind. And here's a perfect example of that. How many of you guys have ever stood up and got dizzy or lightheaded or something, right? Most likely when that happened, now it doesn't happen often, right? If it does happen often, then see your medical professional. It should not happen often. But when it does happen, there's very distinct reasons. Typically, something biological within the body is deficient. You're dehydrated, malnourished, tired. You may be some kind of you're sick, cold, maybe flu, something. There's some condition within the biology of you that's lower than normal. Now, but under normal conditions, the body's reading your mind and it does not get dizzy. And the reason I know it's reading your mind, because in order for you not to get dizzy, the body needs a little extra oxygen to the brain. So when you change that elevation, in other words, you're using resources to engage the muscles and stand the body up, that takes energy, right? And energy in the form of oxygen and blood supply. Well, so does the brain. If the brain doesn't have the proper amount, you're going to feel dizzy, lightheaded. That's a sign that the brain's not getting the proper resources to function properly. So when you stand up and you do not get lightheaded, which is the mother lode of the time, right? That means that the body anticipated you standing up. The thought came to you to stand up and the body already knew it. And what happened was your adrenal system shot a little bit of adrenaline into the system to increase the oxygen content and blood flow to the brain momentarily so you don't get lightheaded. So try it, just stand up. Every time you do it, that's your body reading your mind. So in other words, neuroscience says that the body is precognitive. It's reading your mind. So when your senses are your body, by the way, folks, your eyes, your nose, your ears, that's your body. The interpretation of that content is your mind. All right. So in other words, when you see something, you might see the color green, but it's the mind interpreting the content of the organ, which is the eyeball. You don't see with the eye, you see with the mind. Okay. And this is the cool thing, is the body does not know the difference between something you see with your organ in your three-dimensional space or something you make up in your mind to be true. The body gets on board with it. Remember I said the body reads the mind? You follow me so far? So we make something up in the mind. Guess what the body's going to do? Get on board with it. All right. So if we look at something in the mirror and the interpretation through the organ of the eyeball says, no, you don't look thin. You don't look muscular. You don't look whatever you're saying. The body's going to read that mind, isn't it? And there's going to be a cognitive dissonance between the body and the mind. And they're going to go, no, they're not going to be in cooperation. It's inauthentic. This is not the authentic you. So being authentic means that you give grace. Let's just talk about what it does mean. It's a daily practice of letting go. Letting go of what? Who you think you should be, and be who you are. Okay. If I'm in a body that's not as muscular as I want it to be, that's who I am in this present moment. And as long as I can find grace, love, compassion, and patience for that body, it's going to grow. It's going to expand. It's going to be willing to work with me. It's not going to be in disorder or chaos. The body is going to be reading my mind, and it's going to be in concert. Right? So here's your practice. Authenticity means that we cultivate a courage to be imperfect. Be courageous and be imperfect. That's okay. Because as long as we accept it, we can create the next version. If we fight against it, our body's going to lower its energy. It's not going to have a proper amount of resources for healing, and it's going to get cascade downward. Does that make sense? So every day we set boundaries, allow ourselves to be vulnerable to being authentic. Do you guys think it's tough to be authentic? How many of you guys go out every day and say, I was wrong? Right? So, I mean, sometimes we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. I had a little issue with my youngest daughter, right? She made a bad choice. And it just, I mean, it hit me hard. And I was like, yeah, I drilled into her, like, what are you thinking? What's going on? Why are you doing that? I was abrupt. I was aggressive. And afterwards I felt bad. Right? And I had to be that authentic self and say, I made a mistake. I'm sorry for being so aggressive. We all make mistakes. And I should know you're learning. She's only 14. Come on. We can't treat our children as an adult. We have to give them grace. And so it's important on a daily basis that we cultivate a courage to be imperfect. Setting boundaries for ourselves to be vulnerable, right? Expressing compassion, folks. And this is recorded, so we can write this down later. But expressing compassion, and that comes from knowing. That comes from a very deep knowing that we are made of strength and struggle. Remember what I said got etched in stone? And we believe love is maybe traumatic, right? That's a struggle, and it's not true. So we find these authentic sources of love, of compassion. If we don't have a good model ourselves, and this is not unlikely, the reason we're probably all gathered here today is because we may not have a perfect model, right? We may not be in a perfect experience. And so if that's the truth, then let's go look for something that is better than what we're used to, right? There is examples everywhere. You may have a mentor, like we mentioned Brene Brown and some of her work. She has great work. I love her work because it's based on research, studies. So take a look into her research. So authenticity also demands to be wholehearted, meaning we really need to open this heart and come in with it complete. I'm in. I'm all in. I'm all in for being authentic. How many times do we tap dance, put our toe in the pool? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe not. Right? I've done it. But if we decide that we want something better than this present moment, it means we have to do something different that we haven't done before. That tends to take courage. That means being wholehearted. So I suggest, and I invite everyone to practice authenticity a little at a time. It's a practice. Use some of the things that we talked about, and maybe build a small model, right? And try it out. It's easy to do when we're by ourselves, and there's nothing wrong with that, to practice there. But it's also when we're out in the different environments that we orbit, in your workplace, with your friends, and again, different friends sometimes cultivate a different us. So finding this authentic us, here's one sign that you're not authentic. And it's a feeling. You will feel it, right? When you walk into a room and people are acting a certain way and you just try to fit in, you're going to feel resistance. You're going to feel an obstruction. It doesn't have to be huge. It could be subtle, and most of the time it is. But you're going to feel it. Just pause for a moment right there. When you feel that resistance, just one moment, pause. Feel it. Give it grace. Give the body patience. Give it attention so that you can take note of your authenticity. And when it doesn't feel right, set your boundaries. Set your boundaries. Because only you know what does or does not feel right. So I'm gonna read a authenticity mantra that we've been talking about Brene Brown. So I'll tell you her mantra. And she says it this way. She says, don't shrink, don't puff up, stand your sacred ground. Don't shrink, don't puff up, but stand your sacred ground. Pretty simple, right? What do you think, Lori?
I think that's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful way to put it. Because when we're telling you to be your authentic self, we're not telling you to walk around and puff up your chest or be boastful, but lovingly be kind and be real and just state your truth about who you really, really are. We live in such a polarized world these days. I mean, it used to be you could have a political conversation that people listen to one another. In this day and age, it's like, if you don't agree with me, I'm not going to listen. I don't just listen, I ask questions. Because I truly want to understand why someone who doesn't have the beliefs I do, what makes them tick and why they're thinking the way they're thinking. And you're never going to know that if you don't ask questions. Mm-hmm. And so in the same vein, when you're presenting your authentic self, you have to be gentle about it, not boastful. It's kind of like when I was getting asked questions from the traditional Christians about talking to angels. And I just was very kind and loving and said 80% of the religions in the world believe in angels. That's all I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I mean, 100%. Getting into an argument, trying to defend it, wouldn't have done me any good. So.
We talked a little bit about some things being so autonomic we aren't even aware. So I want to offer you guys a way of doing a self-assessment. And I find this to be highly important. Go into the laboratory, and Lori kind of mentioned something key there is being curious about it, right? Curiosity is an amazing hack. It's your kung fu when it comes to how you can integrate or hack certain things going on within yourself. But I want to offer you a test that I highly recommend everyone does. It is called the Scale of Spain Positivity and Negativity Experience, SPANE, which is scale of positive and negative experience. This is a 12 question or 12 section survey kind of, 6 in terms of positive, 6 in terms of negative, and you score yourself. Basically, you take this test, you can score yourself. And it's important to know what you don't know. It's very important to know what you don't know, because oftentimes, like you said, I asked you if you ever had a feeling that you don't think that there was a thought that generated it. It just came out of nowhere. Well, there is a thought that came out of somewhere. And so this is a great test to do. And it's a, I send a link to Lori, and I'm sure that with the email follow up on this, you guys will get this. And so you can look it up online too, but I encourage you to take this test. It's your own private thing, right? Nobody else will know, don't have to know. But then once you take the test, then implement a practice, like I mentioned, of authenticity on a daily basis, cultivating that courage to be imperfect, accepting it, right? Knowing that you're both strength and struggle. Spending some time in a mindful practice. What does that mean? Well, prayer, meditation, time in nature, grounding, breath work. I mean, Healy, and we're going to talk about some programs I highly recommend. Being your authentic self, right? So, and then after you've done that, commit to a month, a minimum 30 days, and then take the test again. Take a look at your score. I guarantee you, if you're diligent, go to the lab, go be the experiment, but be diligent, be wholehearted in that work, and you'll see that it's going to change. That score will definitely change. All right. So there's some, and in the meantime, while you're doing that, there are some Healy programs I want to suggest that you implement while you're doing these. In the digital nutrition, and now maybe not everybody has these, but we're going to talk about some of these. Well, let's go to the mental balance page first. Within the mental balance page, there is some great programs within that. Take a look at what resonates with you. Emotional well-being. Oh my gosh. What does that mean? Well, we just got done talking about. We just got done talking about how these emotions are in this body. And I want you to understand, 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day in the mind. The mind is to the brain as emotion is to the body. These two are in concert. They enrich the experience of life. This is on purpose. There's no accident here, right? So to understand that that's important, to understand that we have these emotions and we have these thoughts. So emotional well-being is a great one on the mental balance page. And so Lori put some things in the chat there. I know we're kind of out of time. The soul cycle. I mean, the first row in the soul cycle, right across the row, from acceptance, confidence, self-confidence. Man, how many, if you were given 100% energized confidence, right? So your confidence was 100%. How would that change your life? Right? I bet you it would change in some degree. So these, and when you're running these programs, I'm going to encourage you to run them as a microcurrent program, right? With the wristbands. And the reason is because the microcurrent is going to energize the ATP production within your cells. Remember I said the body's precognitive? So when you're energizing the ATP or the energy within the cell, you're actually rewriting or re-instructing some of the way that the body is functioning. So it's going to increase amino acid transport. Amino acids are the building blocks for certain neurotransmitters, right? It's going to increase protein synthesis. Protein synthesis, every action in your body, from blinking your eyes to digesting your food, happens with a protein. So the microcurrent is the other kung fu of the Healy frequencies. So this is why I recommend that you run these programs via the microcurrent, aka the sticky pads or the wristbands. Okay. So you see the list there. You run what you can while you're working on this practice for 30 days. Take the test before, take the test after. Hey, come back next month and tell us how it goes.
Absolutely. I'm going to do it. Let's do it.
I'm in. Let's do it together.
Yes.
Everybody on here. There was 30 people here. All right, let's go. Let's come back next month and see what happens.
Absolutely. I know there were a number of you who were asking questions in the chat about my group coaching program. I put a little info in there, and if you're on this Monday Night Magic email list, I'll send out more detailed information on it. It begins November 15th, and the early bird pricing expires next week. So you want to jump on that real quick.
Remember what I said when you walk into a room and you can feel that energy? When you change and you live a life of authenticity, the result is you come across as genuine, right? You're willing to accept the consequences of being the true you, right? And others will aspire to be like that. Believe me, there's a lack of authenticity in our world right now. I mean, no matter what arena you look, you'll see it. I have been to many of these advanced Dr. Joe events where we're working diligently hours on mindful practices. And then we go on break and you hear people out in the waiting area complaining about how cold it was in the room, or complaining about we didn't get enough breaks, or complaining about whatever. That's so not the idea of being our true authentic self. The idea is being our true authentic self is finding that internal godlike frequency, right? The internal divine intelligence, and letting that show the world as to who we are. And I promise you, your body will thank you, and it will make adjustments to support you all day.
Every day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you guys so much. I'm going to give you the one last tidbit you all need. The next Monday Night Magic is November 13th. Woo-hoo! Woo! Can you believe I said November? I can't.
We're flying through the days. And so if that being said, there's no better time than now to make a shift.
Absolutely. We're here for you guys. Just reach out and let us know if there's topics you want to hear about, because we just love unpacking these topics for you and sharing wisdom and giving you different viewpoints. And we just love you. How about that? And so does Gabby, right? Yes. All right. Happy Monday, everyone. Until next month.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Big love, everybody.
Big love.
So grateful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Namaste.
Namaste.
See you next time. If you want to save the chat, by the way, click those 3 little dots down there. And they'll be on your PC or your laptop, so you can keep all those links. I'm sure you'll see an email with all that goody stuff too, right, Lori?
Absolutely.
I love you, Lori. You are an awesome being. Just saying.
Back at you, my friend. Back at you. All right. We'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Hey, guys. Love you.
Love you.
Thank you.